Well, last week was MozCon, one of the largest search conferences in the world. And one of our TREW crewers was there, Erin Moore. So she's joining me in today's episode to share all things search, which includes a lot of changing landscape of how Google is searching terms and producing information, and a marketer strategy really needs to evolve. So if you're doing things in the same way as 5 years ago, where you're optimizing based on keywords alone, you have really some catching up to do. So Erin gives lots of great practical advice on today's episode. And before we move on to that, I wanted to mention that TREW Marketing is co-hosting the Industrial Marketing Summit. This is a gathering in 2024 of industrial marketers, where we're going to have lots of presentations and panels on best practices for basically marketing to technical audiences. We're co-hosting the event with Cadena's Part Solutions and Gorilla 74. For more information and to join the wait list, go to industrialmarketingsummit.com. All right, let's do this.
Welcome to Content Marketing Engineered, your source for building trust and generating demand with technical content. Here is your host, Wendy Covey.
Hi, and welcome to Content Marketing Engineered. On each episode, I'll break down an industry trend, challenge, or best practice in reaching technical audiences. You'll meet colleagues, friends, and clients of mine who will stop by to share their stories. And I hope that you leave each episode feeling inspired and ready to take action. Before we jump in, I'd like to give a brief shout out to my agency, TREW Marketing. TREW is a full-service agency located in beautiful Austin, Texas, serving highly technical companies. For more information, visit trewmarketing.com. And now, on with our podcast. Hey, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Content Marketing Engineered. I'm joined today by Erin Moore, Account Director at TREW Marketing and repeat guest on this show. So welcome, Erin.
Thanks for having me, Wendy.
You bet. Now, have you caught up with your sleep? You know, you were traveling last week.
Yeah, I was lucky on the way. We'll talk about MozCon, which is where I spent the first half of last week. And we'll mention it was in Seattle. So I'm Austin based. So going, over to the other coast is a lovely trip there. I was able to wake up and run before the conference. Nothing felt rushed. Everything was great. Granted, it did feel like it ended at 7 o'clock at night every day. Worked out great on the time change there, but yes, I'm still catching up. Still getting used to the fact that it is now 2 hours earlier, but I think I'm getting back in the swing of it.
Good. Well, I sure was jealous of the weather you were experiencing instead of 106. So Anyway, welcome back to the heat. And I'm so excited to just chat with you about all the things you heard and learned at MozCon. So I say, let's just jump on in. And maybe we start with, for those who are listening and aren't familiar with this event, what is it? Who hosts it? What's it all about?
Yep. So I don't know how long it's been going on. It's been pretty established for a while. I would say 10 plus years running, maybe close to 15. I think I heard somebody say it's been about 15 years, but it's hosted by Moz, which is an SEO software company. They're one of the dominant players in SEO software. There's a couple others, but they've been on this like education journey, I think the longest. So I remember starting my career moving from PR into marketing 10 years ago at this point. I looked at SEO resources from Moz. So they were kind of my first introduction to the topic. So they host this conference, have for a long time, and it is just SEO. So just search engines, everything around search engines, a little bit of discussion about paid advertising as pertains to Google, and then some other spaces that kind of touch SEO, but by and far it is for search engine people, by search engine people, hosted by kind of the dominant software in the space.
Okay, very good. Well, what were some big themes that were talked about across all the keynotes and presentations?
Yeah, so the funny thing is the theme of the entire conference was the future of search. So it was very forward looking, which it isn't always. And so I think that made it a really interesting conference to attend, because a lot of the speakers were just like visionaries in the field. But there were 4 really big themes that I picked up on that I was particularly interested in. So search is now a lot more than Google search. The idea that you type some words into a search bar and get a result, that's kind of the old way of thinking. And we'll talk about in depth of what that means. But that's kind of theme 1. So second theme, the way Google interprets information and also the way it feeds you that information has changed pretty significantly over the last couple of years. Um, the SEO understanding of Google has changed. So again, what the people whose job is SEO, we also call them SEOs, they understand Google in a different way. And it's not so much that old approach of let's pick the keyword with the most volume and optimize for it. It's a lot more contextual of what are people actually looking for when they type this in? And is it an SEO target or is it something we ignore? Because yes, the volume's really high, but no one's ever going to click through that. So it's gotten a lot more nuanced, which I thought was interesting. That was that was a big theme. And then finally, Google's been evolving. It'll always evolve. But as we've introduced all of this AI, the search engine itself and this chat capability that search now has is under constant evolution. I mean, there's different beta groups. You could sit next to it and search something, and your neighbor next to you could get something totally different. So it's just evolving really quickly, and it's definitely not baked. And I think a lot of that is just to don't put all your eggs in one basket, but know that this is evolving, it's continuing, and there's probably going to be new features added into traditional search as well as an impact. So this is something we'll probably see continuing on for years of like the repercussions and us kind of adjusting to this new method of searching.
Yeah, get ready because we're in shifting sands moving forward. It sounds like. I remember you
Yep,
sent
exactly.
we have a Slack channel, right? And you sent your favorite slide. It was an image from the whole conference, and to me, it sums up what you just explained. So you know what I'm talking about, right? Can you
Yep.
explain what the image was?
Was it the chart with all the little dots on it of
No,
the
it was the
shifting? Oh no,
Barbie.
no, no. It was the Barbie. That's right. It was marketers in 2018, or that fine, refined Barbie. She looks great. Marketers as of 2023. Her makeup's running, her hair's a mess. Somebody clearly has mistreated that Barbie. I think we're all feeling that with all the changes to search and all the changes to everything, AI
Yeah.
and the economy and COVID and yeah. So we're all feeling a little beat up.
Yes, a little stressed trying to keep up with it
Yep.
all. So, well, hopefully this podcast will help to, reduce some of that stress and all the
Yeah.
mascara raccoon eyes under Barbie or anyone else was
Yeah.
cracking
Exactly.
me up. Okay. One more. So what I like to do is go in really deep on those four themes because those sound like great themes. Before we do, I'm curious if any of the speakers talked about shifts in market share of, I mean, Google's obviously been this dominant search engine, or maybe this is part of one of the themes, but
It's
how
part
is
of one of the themes, but
okay, okay, don't
it's
spoil it then. If it,
won't spoil it. Yeah, we'll get into it, but it's the big idea that I came away with is it's not just type in a query, get a page with 10 blue links. Like search is so much more multidimensional. And so
okay,
that relates to that is there's no one source for anything. There's no
got
one
you.
Google platform. There's no one way to get an answer. There's now 1,000 tools at our disposal. And it's like figuring out what they're best suited for in the best circumstances for the audience you need to serve content. It's much more faceted. So
Okay, all right.
interesting space to
So
be right now.
where should we start, Erin?
So let's start talking about that. So search right now is a lot more than Google search. What I mean by that is that even if you think about Google as a platform, it's a platform. It's not a tool. It's a platform. There's 1,000 different places where you can be in Google, and that might be a slight exaggeration, but like there's Google Shopping, there's Google Lens on your phone to take a picture of something. There's actual search results pages. There's Google My Business profiles. There's maps. There's so many different places within that Google ecosystem where you can show up and be visible as a brand. And it's this idea of optimization for Google includes all of that. And I think there's a lot of different platforms within that umbrella that you just don't think about. And they're not all relevant to everybody. If you're
Mhm.
not like we're not, we don't have an office. So the Google local maps listing optimization, like we're not going to optimize because people aren't going to just find us and walk in. So that might not be as relevant for some people. Google Shopping, if you don't have products, not as relevant, but a lot of the other areas are. Um, and it's not just that they're different platforms, but they're different resource types. So we need to start thinking about multimedia resources. It's not just web pages, it's not just text, it's images, it's video, it's audio, all showing up in search results again on the search results page, but also across the video carousel that pops up across, the AI chat answers, it'll pull in resources, it'll pull in links to items, it'll pull in images. There's so many different places where you can be visible now. So thinking about it as search is a page with 10 results. First of all, that's wrong. Now it scrolls. Now there's AI at the top. Now there's, ads that pop up in different spots. But thinking about it that way is just really outdated. And it's a dangerous way to think about this because it's very, very limiting. So really you have to think about like every piece of content you put out there, you need to optimize for some form of visibility, some form of search, and you need to just be looking a lot further. And I'll give an example of this real quick. So when I say multimedia, video is the one that I think is the most prevalent. Videos showing up in those search results pages have increased 45% since 2021. So more than a quarter of all Google searches have video results. And that's not even
More than
including
a
the
quarter.
fact, yes. And that's
I
just
don't feel
Google
like
searches.
I'm seeing it on my end. That's interesting. Huh.
It's definitely swayed by different topics. So I will say if you, and this is like researchers who look at just massive amounts of search data. Because think about like in your personal life, you probably see more video results than the professional.
Fair.
So it's definitely probably a little nuanced based on industry, but we also see that engineers are asking for video content, especially the younger engineers. And so 27% of Google searches have video. That doesn't include how many people start their search in YouTube, which is another theme that I picked up is that search is starting in different channels. So you need to be looking more broadly than just at Google.
So let's talk about those other channels. So YouTube, what else?
YouTube, it was interesting again, because Moz is B2B and B2C. So there was a really good example of an SEO agency that worked with like a clothing company, and they looked at how can we increase our visibility. Searches were down, clicks were down. Their positions was the same, but they were seeing fewer impressions and fewer click-throughs. And what they realized is that fewer people were going to Google to search for what they were selling. And so they started going, okay, well, if they're not searching for this on Google, where are they looking for this? Because people still buy clothes. And they found out that, again, not as relevant to our audience, but they were going to TikTok, they were going to Instagram, they were going to Pinterest, that travel, all of these different topics that we're seeing like just drop-offs in Google click-throughs. It's not because somebody wasn't doing their job or wasn't like they messed up. People just weren't going to that channel anymore. They were going elsewhere. So I think it's looking at your sources. It's going to be a little different for everybody, but like look at your Google Analytics, track it over time. Is there a channel? Is LinkedIn sending more traffic? Because that would be a really big one for our audience. We do see quite a bit of activity sometimes for some audiences in YouTube. Sometimes it's Reddit. Sometimes it's the fact that some really technical audiences kind of crowdsource info. Maybe it's GitHub if you're software. Maybe it's industry publications or something like that where you got a sponsored article a year ago and it's still driving traffic. It's looking at what's sticking out to you that feels like an outlier. And I think just honing in on that and understanding that's where my audience is and they're engaged with my content there. Even if organic is sloping down and it's, not because somebody made a mistake, it's because people maybe aren't going there first to look for answers.
Got you. I'm glad you mentioned GitHub. I would add Stack Overflow and industry directory sites is another one too. So great point that they end up. So look at your sources, see who's coming in and try to optimize on those channels instead of just focusing on Google. Okay.
Agreed. And again, if you haven't invested in YouTube, spend some time thinking about it. We're seeing people want video content. And no matter how much video content you give them, they still want more. They engage with it. There's the whole wild west of YouTube that you can optimize for. There's a lot of opportunity there. And especially if you have any video now, it's pretty easy to repurpose it, spin it up into shorter clips, create different channels of content for different people. There's a lot of space, I think, to experiment there. And I don't think very many B2B companies are utilizing that space, even though their audience is there. So
okay, good. All right. What else was the big thing?
Okay, so Google changes the way they look at information. And they feed us information differently. And what I mean by that is something that you searched back in 2018, if you searched today, you'd probably get totally different results. Some results are going to be the same. Others are going to have changed. And the reason for this is there's a couple of reasons. So think about the last couple of years. there's a big thing called intent switches that's happening. And Lily Ray, who we actually interviewed on this podcast, spoke on intent switches. And it's the idea that the meaning of a search term changes over time, either from the user's perspective or, from society. But this is heavily influenced by news and events. And she gave a really good example, and it was in, early 2020, the number one ranking for the word masks was a Halloween store. Whole page, all Halloween stores. They're never going to get that ranking back. Masks no longer mean Halloween masks. They lost that ranking, and it should be off their list because the intent, the meaning is completely different now. That's no longer a relevant Halloween term. It's like the CDC and the National Institute of Health. It's a bunch of healthcare groups ranking for the word mask because that's what it means now. We mean medical masks. We don't mean a Halloween mask. And so that's an example of an intent switch where current events happened, something changed, and the term means something else.
So you mean the Halloween store can't just write the word masks all over their website and re-rank for that, Erin?
Well, and that's the part too of one of the trends being that SEOs are getting a little more strategic. They shouldn't want to do that. They should understand that when somebody types in the word mask, they don't mean a Halloween mask. Them getting a ranking there, it's not going to help them because it's just not what people are looking for. And so that was one of the big things, is that the intent switches are influenced by news and events. And we also see things change by user behavior. So a good example of this is how Google interprets search. We're seeing the rise of these like question queries that Google's just answering. And a good example is, how tall was Abraham Lincoln? Nobody ever why would you want to rank for that? That's what they call a zero click query. Google's serving that info up. You search it when you're like at happy hour with your friends because you're having a debate. You get the result and you don't click on anything because now you're done. And so we're seeing a lot more of that where Google is answering these kind of these small queries that can be answered right away. It's just knocking those off the list. It's serving them up an answer and you don't have to continue on. So there's a lot more happening there. And then the last part is like homonyms. So we see intent switches changing how Google interprets search with something like a homonym, where the same word can mean different things in different industries. Mesh is a good example. Is it a fabric mesh? Is it medical mesh? Is it CFD meshing software? Based on the user and based on what you searched in the past, you're going to see slightly calibrated results that are slightly different results calibrated to your history. So if I've searched a lot of medical topics in the past, medical mesh and the mesh, standards, whatever they are going to be first in my list. If I have only ever searched for fabric and I am a designer, I'm probably going to see those terms more highly. So there's a lot of calibration happening based on my personal history within the tool. So personalization has been really big.
Okay. Hey, back to the quick, question answer thing, the Abraham Lincoln. So it's going to give me the answer. Will it continue to give me a source, or does the source go away and it's just an answer?
Depends. So right now, I think that's a big question with the rise of all of these AI chat tools. So SGE is Google's. What we're seeing right now, and by we, I mean, based on my experience with the speakers, people who are doing research on this, they're seeing that a lot of the times the AI generated answer it's pulling in different stuff from other places on the page, not necessarily like the search listings, but it's those other augmented answers. So those quick answers, those FAQs that they're actually getting rid of, they are the same as when you're in search where it says like additional questions. It might be the same as the people also ask box. It's going to be the same questions in two different spots on the page. So in terms of, will they still cite sources? In some places on the page, and in other places they won't. And we don't necessarily know what the page is going to look like tomorrow, today, in 6 months, because right now there's a lot of repetition. So I think they're trying to figure out how they want to display that info.
Yeah.
And then figure out, do we give sources for this? So
okay,
to be determined.
Interesting. All right. Because whoever used to dominate on, that snippet, of course, had all this traffic going to their site. But it seems to me that if the new way seems to be moving towards, well, it's just commonly known that this is the answer. And so we're not going to give that source anymore. So,
yeah. And there's a difference between the Google populated how tall is Abraham Lincoln. A lot of the times they weren't necessarily citing sources, or the source was like Wikipedia.
okay.
But Google is generating a lot more of that themselves. And it's a little bit different than a featured snippet where it's very clearly a subset of an article, and that would be something that an SEO would still target. But these question answer things that no one's clicking on, it doesn't make sense to target that. You're not getting traffic. It's pretty much Google owned.
Okay. So if we're not targeting that, what should we be targeting?
Yes. So this leads into this SEO understanding of how Google has changed. So there's a whole session by Dr. Pete Myers. He's a marketing scientist at Moz. There are some very smart people who just, again, marketing scientists, like they're scientists. This is what they study. So he posited that there's 3 different types of queries. Some are SEO targets, some aren't. So those questions, how tall is Abraham Lincoln? What time is it in Portugal? Where is the world's tallest waterfall? Like those are factual queries. Google can answer them. Nobody's clicking on them. That's not a target for SEO. Google's got that covered. There's also these fluid queries, which is where the AI chat is coming to play. They're more open-ended questions that need customization. You're having a bit of a dialogue. You're going back and forth. It would be like typing into Google's chat or Google search rather. Where is a good place to vacation with a 3-year-old and a 2-month-old that has access to the beach? You can't type that into Google search right now because it's not going to understand that way, way, way too much. But you can chat that in to an AI chat. And so you've got these fluid queries that are purely suited for chat. They're going to be unique to every user. Nobody is really going to have the same search twice. It's a totally different experience. And where AI doesn't play well and where SEO does play well is kind of the current fusion space, which is authoritative content answering a query that the user has. And this is how people would traditionally search and how we would traditionally optimize for SEO. So things like, how do I set up GA4? My blog post might rank for that, or our webinar, or a video that we've created, something that is authoritative content by experts on a topic where you're not going to be able to just open up Google, get an answer, but you don't need to have that back and forth dialogue with an AI chat to refine it. One of the most important AI trends, how do I build a marketing plan for an engineering company? It's things like that that do require a response from an expert who's done it. So that's kind of the meat and potatoes for SEO.
Okay. So in some of the large language models with the chat interface like ChatGPT and Claude, I could go in there and ask that same question and it would give me a summary of the answer, right? And just kind of leave it at that. Google, meanwhile, would show, well, here are the top, at least the old Google, if you will, yep. Here are the top blog posts on that subject. And then you would click in. So Google's chat feature, is it somewhere in between those two, Erin, where it's going to have the source?
Yeah. So sometimes. Okay. And again, it's all in development. So where it ends up, who knows? For right now, they are getting better at showing sources. They will give you a summary. It's not always right. A lot of times it's making stuff up. And I heard a lot of examples of people who have put it through its paces of compare Bitcoin to Llama Coin. And it would give you a really significant rundown of, well, Llama Coin has been more volatile. Llama Coin doesn't exist. They made it up on the spot. So it's like, it's giving you very real looking answers. So there's definitely some danger there. On top of the fact that there was a Medic update in 2021 where it's going along with a lot of, and we've talked about this before, but Google's EEAT. So it's prioritizing authority and expertise and trustworthiness and experience, real demonstrable experience in who it ranks. So a big part of what's ranking right now is you need to be an expert. And so I think right now, all the AI is steering away from anything that is your money or your health. So it will not give you an answer in the Google tools if you ask it to compare sometimes different Bitcoins or different, and if you ask it a medical question, it just won't answer it because there is such a big threat of it giving you incorrect information and that causing a real damage to your health or your money. So they've kind of steered away from that.
Putting myself in the shoes of, say, a design engineer that's working on something that could have a pretty big impact on somebody's life, you need accurate data. And so these tools, the lure of these tools are great because they seem easy to use, the chat bots and, all of that. But at the end of the day, you have to have that source material so you can go fact check one way or the other. So I'm hammering it on as much for that, as of course, we all want to see traffic driven to our websites and our blog posts and things we spent all this time and effort on to write and share our knowledge about. So I hope that there's going to be some sort of middle ground here. And yeah.
I will say, with how much SEO is changing, nobody at the conference felt like it was doom and gloom. And SEOs,
Right.
again, are dependent on Google has results that have links. And nobody was saying, well, SEO, I mean, it's the whole like SEO is dead. And somebody, I forget who, in their presentation cited how many times that's been said over the years, how many times it's been said that SEO is dead from the 90s to a couple of years ago. It's a constant refrain, and it's not dead, it's just different. The tools
Yeah.
changed, the way we use them changed. There's new technology, we have to use them differently. And it's paving the way for more strategic SEO that is more aligned with your overall marketing efforts versus people search this keyword, I need to have it everywhere. And you go, no, okay, but Google's starting to get smarter. And one of the other trends was the thought around entities. So how do you make Google see you as an entity? Well, you need to feed them a lot of information, and you need to feed them a lot of information yourself in a pretty specific way that says, hey, this true marketing that you see on our website is the same one as in this LinkedIn, is the same one as does this research report with Global Spec, the same one that has Wendy Covey as the CEO. Here's her LinkedIn. You have to spell all of that out very specifically for them so that Google can see that it's all the same group. And we have demonstrable expertise and experience in these topic areas. And so we're an authority on them, and it can actually promote our content. But it's a different way of thinking about it, because my first thought is all of that's public. It's all on our website. Of course, Google knows it's there. They've crawled it. They know it's there. But it's like, no, we're one true marketing. Like there's one group doing all of this. It's the same group. And you have to kind of spell that out for them.
Interesting. And of course, if you're in a company that is more complex with, say, a parent company and, all of that, then
Causing
really
a
want to
lot of
spell that
headaches.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's,
Okay.
there were a couple different speakers who spoke on brand awareness, which again is really interesting in SEO because it's always been traffic and clicks, and brand awareness feels a little bit less measurable, more fluffy, but it's this idea of you're driving brand awareness. You need to own your brand queries. So a lot of people were more focused on the keywords of, I don't know, book a vacation to Spain, and not on their brand name. And so what they found is there's really big brands out there that aren't ranking for their own brand name, or they're position 3 or something like that.
Wow.
And somebody's review to using the tool is position 1, or it's, how do I use Expedia to book a trip was like one of the examples. Expedia is not the first result on that. It's a blog. It's a blog about how to use it, because Expedia doesn't answer that question. So it's like invest in content around your own brand and invest in your own brand. First and foremost, maintain, it's called your knowledge graph for Google. Like spell out exactly who you are, because if you use different brand names, how is Google ever going to know you're the same company if you don't show a cohesive front? If you have different positioning on different pages and different resources, how is Google ever supposed to know what the real positioning is if you can't tell them exactly what it is? So a lot of this is like, get your house in order, clean up all of your public facing information, because you need to present a strong, cohesive front to search so that it can understand who you are and serve you up in the appropriate circumstances.
And dare
Otherwise,
I
like, we're
say,
expecting way too much.
you need to do that for your prospects too.
Yeah, exactly. It's good for the audience. It's good.
Yeah.
It does feel a lot more strategic.
Um,
It feels kind of like an awakening of like all the good things that we should have been doing the whole time.
yeah. Quit trying to game things and go back to a
Yep.
strategy and a
Yep.
cohesive message. And great. It's wonderful advice, Erin. I see it. I feel it. Oh, it's all making sense. Okay. What else?
All right, let's see. What haven't we talked about? We've kind of jumped all over my trends. So I'll recap the trends real quick. So we have search is a lot more than Google search. That relates to multiple platforms, that relates to multimedia, different channels. We've got Google is interpreting content differently with intent switches, with all these updates. EEAT is part of that. Entities are part of that. And then we have this SEO understanding of Google has changed. And that's just like everyone getting a little bit smarter
Yeah.
about how to use this, understanding that not every search is an SEO opportunity, because sometimes it's chat, sometimes it's how tall is Abraham Lincoln. So we're really going for that middle ground of things where like our authority and expertise can answer. And then finally, we've got, the whole advent of AI and the fact that it is going to shake up the industry for a long time. It's going to change how people use the tools. And we really don't necessarily know, is this chat-based search experience going to be the end result, or is it going to be that they bake that in to the search itself? So there's a speaker, Tom Anthony of Search Pilot. He has a whole theory about latent spaces, and I'm not going to lie, some of it is over my head. It's pretty meta. But the idea that he was kind of positing was that we'll eventually be able to move away from this entity-based model where I'm telling Google, we are TREW Marketing. Wendy Covey is our CEO. Here are our different channels where you can find us. And it's instead understanding through this LLM model of the language understanding, like it's understanding it on a deeper level. And it's being able to make not 1,400 connections with schema, which is what we're currently using. It's limited to 1,400, but it's billions of like neurons understanding every facet. And that search could eventually move to more of like think about the last time you booked a house on Airbnb or any kind of vacation rental. You can pick how many bedrooms do you want? What area of town do you want to be in? And he has this theory that search is going to move in that direction where you can have a more conversational search query, and then you can narrow it down using things like filters or using language to get a really robust search result that isn't, I am going to search Airbnb. I'm going to open that up. I'm going to apply filters. I'm going to go back to the drawing board. I'm going to search somewhere else, to having that all in Google where you can have this more multidimensional search experience on one platform.
Okay.
So that is very future looking. Who knows if that's where we're going, but it's a very interesting thought that they might actually take LLM capabilities more holistically and like completely change the way the tool works instead of just like introducing this kind of like add-on that does something a little different.
Yeah. Yeah. Any conversations around, is LLM data going to get better, meaning less erroneous, like more fact checking, less bias? Any talks around that?
It's interesting because there weren't explicit talks about that, but it was baked into a lot of conversations. A lot of it is not that the model gets less incorrect, but you get better at prompting for what you want. And part of this was image too, because we know the image generators sometimes bring out some really odd results. If you've ever had a person in an image generator, they don't always have the right number of fingers. There's goofy things like that. And some of that is based around the data that they get. Like there's very few pictures of just hands. That's apparently why hands look so wonky, is because like hands being front and center in different positions is pretty rare. So the AI generator just like doesn't really know what a hand looks like from every angle.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of it is our prompting and just getting really explicit at what you want, and knowing that sometimes there's a lot in the news about this right now, but like they have a lot of bias because it's fed on what's out there in the internet right now.
Sure.
So if you want something different, you have to give it examples and you have to be really explicit about, what do you want to see?
Yeah.
Is, who is it being represented? What race are they? What ethnicity? What age? How tall are they? What kind of body type do you have? If you want something that doesn't adhere to basically your most base stereotype. So you're having to get really explicit with what you feed it. And then I talked to some people who are using like a combination of tools. So they might use an image generator to get an image, but they're using ChatGPT to write the description to get the image. Or they're using a stock photo and then giving that to ChatGPT, having it describe it. They're tweaking stuff and then they're feeding it to an image generator to get exactly what they want. So people are doing really interesting things to get around that incorrect info, to get around the bias.
Yeah.
They're architecting their queries, they're architecting their prompts.
Yeah.
So
okay. All right. So wow, a lot of information here. Let's bring it back home for those listening. Like, what are some takeaways? Like, what should a marketer in industry, in engineering, manufacturing, in any industrial space, what should we be doing?
Yeah. So first and foremost, diversify. It's no longer just Google. It's not you create web content and content optimized for Google search. Diversify your channels, your platforms, and your content types. So invest time in creating and optimizing your video content. Do some research on key terms and topics for YouTube because they will not be the same ones as your top terms in Google. Different people go to different channels to search for different things. So you might find that Google is fantastic for some topics and YouTube might be much better for like tutorials and how-tos and things like that. So like actually do your research in YouTube for top terms and top content and top channels. Optimize your videos when you actually do create them. Create custom thumbnail images, add chapters using key terms, add relevant links to video descriptions, and engage with comments because it is still a social network. And I saw examples at this conference of videos that should have been less authoritative, but the comments and the fact that they got so much engagement put them on the top of the page one of Google search results, as
Wow.
well as ranking really well on YouTube.
Huh.
So yeah, pay attention to video. And then in terms of diversifying on top of that, we're seeing a lot more talk of PR to create recent authoritative content because recency is a big deal. News stories still have a lot of clout to them. We're seeing a lot of rise on social, some people even using social to drive some of the press engagements by getting enough attention in social through influencers, through working with experts. We're seeing an increase in sponsored content and digital advertising. So just cast that net wide. Every channel is on the table again. Evaluate it for your audience. Think about how you can use it because you can no longer just rely on Google search feeding you what you need.
Yeah. So you're right. If I go back to sort of that inbound marketing formula from, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago, it was
Yeah.
publish a lot of content on the same subject and you'll win it organic. And now what I'm hearing from you is it needs to be authoritative content, not just a repeat of the same topic that's out there. And it needs to be found in different channels, not just on your own website or your owned channels, if you will.
Yep. And if you think about it from a prospect's perspective, if I sit here and talk about myself all day long, that carries a lot less weight than me being able to say, oh, I worked with this client and they have a testimonial about me. We have reviews over here. We did a research report. It's being able to be found across these different channels also builds up your authority when you're talking to like humans, not just a search engine. So it's always been a good thing to do. It was never not a good thing to do, but now it's also tied into now search recognizes that it's a good thing to do. And it's part of SEO best practices,
Yeah.
which again is a nice kind of full circle moment from find some keywords and write content and like stick it on a page somewhere.
Yeah,
So
it's a more strategic content strategy. And so we still,
much more.
I'm charting this in my head right now, like thinking, how would I put this together for a client? So we still have themes, right? And we still
Yeah.
have big topics we want to talk about, but the channels in which you share that information and the way you architect that content itself is going to look different than, oh, there's this one key piece and derivative content
Mhm.
and, put it here and
And
there.
it's not the same for everybody. Some people, based on where your audience is, your audience might be very active on YouTube. They might not care about YouTube at all. They might be really active on, again, Reddit or GitHub or Stack Overflow. They might have no idea what that is. So it's really understanding who you're talking to
Mhm.
and where do they go for information, and then actually using those channels in an authentic way. So nobody wants you going to Reddit and posting a promotional message, you're going to get kicked off the platform.
Yeah.
But it's like knowing where your audience is and how to reach them and how to provide authoritative, helpful content that they need in the format they want on the channels where they're active.
Great. Okay. Well, Erin, where can people go to learn more and connect with you?
So I am on LinkedIn at I think Erin Gleason Moore, maybe. We'll have to find that out. I'll stick a link in there. And then of course, True Marketing's website, you can find me there. And then across True Marketing's profiles.
Yeah. And you mentioned you hosted a 2-part SEO series earlier in 2023, earlier this year. And
Yep.
Lily Ray came on and talked about EAT. So
Yes.
if you guys are hearing that acronym and don't know what the heck it is, that's definitely a must listen to episode.
Yep.
And then you also
Absolutely.
had, who was it? Dale was
I had
on.
Dale. Yep. Dale Bertrand, who is, he talked about conversion-based SEO, which is another really interesting topic in this more strategic SEO. We're not going for clicks. Think about what you actually want people to do once they get to your site, and then let's prioritize high converting terms and high converting traffic. So really interesting topic. Once you feel a little bit more on even ground with SEO, I think that's kind of like the more advanced of great. Now let's think about this strategically, how we can use this.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you for stopping by, for sharing everything you learned at the conference last week. And now you can go get some more rest and catch up with your time zone change.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much for having me, Wendy. And as always, I'm sure in 3 months, things will look different. Updates were happening at the conference. So just everyone out there, stay on top of it and just try to keep an ear out for news because it does change very quickly.
There you go. Well, we'll just have to have you back on.
I'll
Thanks,
be a
Erin.
regular recurring. Great. Thank you, Wendy.
Thanks for joining me today on Content Marketing Engineered. For show notes, including links to resources, visit truemarketing.com/podcast. While there, you can subscribe to our blog and our newsletter and order a copy of my book, Content Marketing Engineered. Also, I would love your reviews on this podcast. So please, when you get a chance, subscribe and leave me your review on your favorite podcast subscription platform. Thanks and have a great day.